Greetings. Today we are going to be looking at the differences between action and linking verbs. Now, when people hear verbs, they most likely think only about actions, but there are actually many different types of verbs. But of course, in this lesson, we will be concentrating on action and linking verbs, right? So let's commence with action verbs. What is an action verb? An action verb expresses action. So it's pretty self-explanatory. It tells us what someone or something does, and that someone or something would be the subject of the sentence, right? So an action verb tells us what the subject of the sentence does, right? What activity the subject is engaged in, right? And of course, the subject could be a person or a thing. So let's look at some examples. Jack plays the piano. Jack is the subject, but what is Jack doing, or what does Jack do? He plays the piano. So plays is the action. 2, Ethan and Tom ran the race. Ethan and Tom are our subjects, and what did they do? What did they do? But because this is past tense, so they ran the race. So ran will be our action. 3, we eat food. We would be the subject and eat is the action. We eat food, right? So what do? We eat food, right? So all these verbs highlighted in red would represent examples of action verbs, right? Because they express action. They tell us what the subject is doing, right? Now, it is worth mentioning that action verbs can be transitive or intransitive. Transitive means that the verb requires a direct object, whereas intransitive means that the verb does not require one. Okay, so exactly. Transitive means that a direct object is required for the sentence to make sense. Okay? So if you come across these terms, this is what it means. The property or the feature of transitivity, right? So if the verb is transitive, that means that it requires a direct object for it to make sense or for it to be complete. Okay, and you know the direct object is going to be the person or the thing that receives the action of the verb. So the direct object in the sentence is going to respond to the question of who or what receives the action, right? The action, you see that? So that means that the whatever follows an action verb is going to be the object, right? So the person or thing that follows an action verb is going to be an object, right? A direct object. So, and of course we know intransitive means that it does not require an object. So let's look at some examples. If I use the verb to hit, and I say he hit, he hit. What or who did he hit? That's the question you would ask, because that sentence is incomplete. We need a direct object. We need someone or something to receive the hitting, right? So he hit would be ungrammatical. That would not be correct according to the rules of grammar. You need a direct object because it is a transitive verb, right? So that's just an example. So he hit the ball. So that is no complete and grammatical, right? And let's look at an example of an intransitive verb. So an intransitive verb would be like to sleep. If you say I sleep, That doesn't require a direct object. That does not require anyone or anything to receive the sleeping. You see what I mean? So I sleep is perfectly fine. That's grammatically correct, right? So just bear in mind when it comes to transitive or intransitive, just bear in mind that action verbs can be both transitive or intransitive. I know you would know what these terms mean, right? Action verbs are modified by adverbs, right? So this means that if you want to describe an action, you have to use an adverb. And remember, adverbs describe the actions of verbs, right? So when we say that adverbs modify verbs, we're talking about action verbs. They describe some element of an action, whether it be the time of the action, the place of the action, the degree, the frequency, etc., right? So action verbs are modified by adverbs. So if we want to add more information about an action verb, we will use an adverb, okay? So this is an action verb, and now we are going to proceed to linking verbs. So we move on to linking verbs, and unlike action verbs, linking verbs will have a different function. Well, action verbs describe and express an action, linking verbs do something completely different, okay? So a linking verb connects the subject of the sentence to additional information about the subject. And this additional information we would call a subject complement, right? It tells us what the subject is. So like an action verb that tells us what the subject does, a linking verb is going to tell us what the subject is. So it provides additional information about the subject, right? Now, copula is a term that is used for linking verbs, right? So if you come across that term, that's just a broad term that is used for these types of verbs, linking verbs, right? And the verb to be is going to be the most common linking verb, right? Many students often wonder how is the verb to be a verb, but this is because they believe that verbs can only be actions. So once you understand that verbs can have many different functions, then you will understand that verbs like to be cannot, words like to be or be can be a verb, right? Right. Because not all verbs express action. So let's look at some examples. You are tall. You will be the subject, okay? Are will be the conjugated form of to be, tall. So, yes, right? So the verb to be, that would be an example of a linking verb. And it's not describing an action, it's actually describing, it's actually connecting the subject to additional information. 2, they seem tired. Again, seemed is our linking verb, and our subject will be they, right? And it's linking, the verb is linking the subject to additional information, okay? 3, she looks beautiful. She is the subject. Looks will be the linking verb, and looks is, and the verb to look would be linking the subject she and beautiful, right? So remember I told you that subject complements would be additional information about the subject. So let's see what could constitute a subject complement, right? So subject complements can be nouns, which we will call predicate nouns, adjectives, which we will call predicate adjectives, or pronouns, which we would call predicate pronouns. And these are just nouns, adjectives, and pronouns that come after linking verbs, right? So any noun that follows a linking verb will be a predicate noun. Any adjective that follows a linking verb will be predicate adjective, will be a predicate adjective. And any pronoun that follows a linking verb will be a predicate pronoun, okay? So let's look at these examples here. All of these verbs are followed by adjectives. Therefore, these will represent predicate adjectives because they follow linking verbs, right? Now, let me give you an example of a predicate noun, a noun that follows a linking verb. So, you could say we are friends. Friends would be a noun, right? And friends follows the word friends follows the linking verb to be, right? Are. So friends would be a predicate noun. An example of a predicate pronoun would be it was he. He is the subject pronoun and he follows a linking verb. And you may ask why not it was him. We wouldn't use him because him would be a direct object. Him would be an object pronoun. And remember, these are not action verbs. So there's no action taking place. So there's no one to receive the action. Right? So you would use he. You would use a subject pronoun. So anytime you are using a pronoun after a linking verb, it has to be a subject pronoun. Right? Because you cannot use an object pronoun there. Right? So if you're using a linking verb with a pronoun, the pronoun has to be the subject pronoun. So it was he. Because remember, we're not talking about action verbs. We're talking about linking verbs. Right? The pronoun provides additional information about the subject. Right? It's not receiving any action. So you do not use the object pronoun. Okay? And linking verbs are modified by adjectives. So when we want to describe a linking verb, we are going to use an adjective, not an adverb. Adverbs are going to be used when we want to describe action verbs, right? But for linking verbs, if you want to describe them, we use adjectives, right? So yes, so how do we know that a verb is a linking verb? Okay, so what we can do is that we can look at it and we can replace it with the equal sign, right? And it should, and whatever follows should give additional information about the subject. So it should be either a noun, a pronoun, or an adjective, right? So you equals tall, yes. They equals tired. She looks beautiful. So she equals beautiful. Yes. So all of these are linking verbs, of course. So many verbs relating to these senses will be linking verbs. So smell, taste, etc. Right? Many of those will be linking verbs because they're going to connect the subject to additional information, right? So yes, but let's go back to number 3. Looks. You may say, can the verb look, so can the verb look be a linking verb as well? Yes. I mean, an action verb as well? Yes. Because if I say she looks carefully, that's changing the meaning completely. So the verb to look can function as a linking and an action verb depending on the context. Okay, and that's what we're going to proceed to, because I'm going to show you that some verbs can actually function as an action or a linking verb depending on the context, right? So let's get to it. Okay, so we move on to verbs that can be action and linking depending on the context, okay? So let's look at the verb to look. Now, she looks good. That's a linking verb because that is describing, the verb looks is describing her appearance. Okay? So we have to use an adjective because the verb look is not expressing an action. It is linking the subject, which is she, to the additional information, which would be good in this case, and it's an adjective. Okay? So looks refers to her appearance, right? On the contrary, Harry looks carefully. Now, carefully is an adverb. So carefully is describing the action of looking. So in this case, Harry's looking, he's searching for something, right? So remember, if we want to describe an action verb, we have to use an adverb, right? And if we want to describe a linking verb, we have to use an adjective, okay? So yeah, so this is the first example, right? Another one would be to remain. So I remained here. Remain in this case is talking about a physical action of staying in one place. So that's an action. Okay? So we use an adverb there. Here would be an adverb of place because it tells us where I remain, where the action took place. Okay? So here would be describing remain, which is an action verb. Okay? And here, they remained friends. Remain in this case is the linking verb because remain is connecting the subject to additional information. Friends. Friends would be their state, right? So noun. So this would be a noun, and this would be what we would call predicate noun, as discussed earlier in the lesson. Because predicate nouns would be nouns that follow linking verbs. They're not objects because they're not receiving any action, right? So yes, so this is a linking verb. So in the first instance, you have an action which refers to staying in one place, and then over here you have a linking verb, right? So this does not express action. So these are just two of the many examples that there are of verbs which can be action or linking depending on the context, right? So yes, now we're going to proceed to the quiz. Okay, so we move on to the quiz, right? So determine whether the verbs that are underlined are action or linking verbs. So the verbs that you see underlined in red, you have to determine whether these verbs are action or whether these verbs are linking verbs. So you have to read the sentence and figure out, determine what is the context, right? So 1, the soup tastes delicious. So taste would have to be a linking verb. Why is that? Because first of all, soup, it cannot perform an action. That's one thing. And if you replace taste with the equal sign, the soup equals delicious, that would be correct. That would make sense. So this is a linking verb. This is linking the soup to additional information. And it's not describing an action. It's not an action. Because the soup can't taste, literally. So this is a linking verb. 2, I feel the surface. Feel. Feel is talking about an action, right? Because feel is talking about touching the actual surface, right? So this is an action verb, right? So this is one of those verbs that can function as either a linking or an action verb, right? Because when we use feel in the context of being a linking verb, we're talking about our emotions. So I feel well, I feel sick, what have you, right? 3, Susan turns red when she sees him. So turn could be, are we talking about turn, like turn your head, which would be an action, or we mean body, are we referring to a bodily reaction? We're referring to a bodily reaction, so that's therefore a linking verb. It's not describing an action. She doesn't literally turn red. Her body, her body has that reaction. That's not a physical action. That's not an action. That's describing. That's a description, right? So that's a linking verb. 4, we were enemies. Okay. You know, this is the verb to be, so we do not even have to look at this again because the verb to be is automatically a linking verb, right? And 5, the plumber fixed the pipe. Of course, fix is an action, right? That's an action, so that's an action verb, right? All right. So this brings us to the end. I hope that you understood everything in this lecture between action and linking verbs. Thanks for watching and see you next time.